booms and busts, labor market opportunities, and then college attendance. The main research question in this article was how did the recent housing boom and housing bust affect college enrollment during the 2000s? So, interestingly enough, on the findings for 4-year degrees, it had a very marginal effect, almost nothing. So, people that had plans of going to 4-year degrees were still going to go, regardless of the housing boom or bust. But on 2-year degrees, whether or not it was a housing boom or bust affected it positively or negatively up to 25%. That's pretty substantial. So, why? Well, it's because the housing markets directly affect the labor markets, and therefore the opportunity cost for FIRE jobs, which is finance, insurance, and real estate, to go get a second degree during those times. So changes in housing prices changes in housing prices and housing supply directly affect the local labor markets. And how is because they stimulate the construction industry, plus electric, plumbing, HVAC, welding, etc. When you have an increase in house value, then you have an increase in housing wealth and relaxed liquidity constraints associated with that. And also the increase in housing transactions is going to stimulate the finance market. So for mortgage brokers and real estate and things of that nature. So again, on the constrained choice model, and we're only talking about people that were on the cusp of going to college in the first place for 2-year degrees, basically. So during a housing boom, there's an increased demand for labor jobs and also increased pay for those jobs because supply and demand. So the opportunity cost or the foregone pay of working during a good labor market, of college led to a negative economic rent because obviously housing boom means that the opportunity cost of going to college, you have to give up that pay. And so the college is not worth it during that time. But the study showed that during a housing bust, when the demand and pay for labor jobs is down, then the opportunity cost of college leads to a positive economic rent. So you have that 25% increase of people going to college during the bust. Interesting article. I personally wouldn't have thought to make this connection or thought that there would have been a connection between these two things before reading it.
In June of 2020, the U.S. Supreme Court blocked the Trump administration's attempt to end DACA, or the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. And as we approach this presidential election, it's crucial to ask what policy implications did this decision have on undocumented immigrant youth? Undocumented youth have a particularly low rate of high school graduation, and this paper aims to explore whether granting youth legal status through DACA impacts youth investment in human capital through high school enrollment and graduation rates. DACA works by deferring deportation for 2 years and allowing youth to reside legally in the US, among other benefits, but they have to be enrolled in high school, have graduated, or obtained a GED in order to get these benefits. So based on the constrained choice model, DACA increases the benefit of going to high school, increases the cost of not attending high school, and therefore decreases the opportunity cost of going to high school. This is illustrated in the results of this study that can be seen in these graphs. On the left, the results translate to the fact that DACA led to a 2.5% increase in school attendance for Hispanic immigrant non-citizen youth. On the right, you can see a 7.5% increase in high school graduation for undocumented immigrant youth, which indicates that 49,000 additional Hispanic youth obtained a high school diploma since the start of DACA. So because DACA increases the benefit associated with going to high school, it increases the economic rent of attending and graduating from high school. This provides compelling evidence that short-term policies like DACA can have long-term positive effects on undocumented immigrant youth as they incentivize high school attendance and contribute to providing more opportunity and producing an educated immigrant workforce.
Bland, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd are names most of us know from their tragic deaths. Most Americans are familiar with the events that led to the murders of these three people, but most of us are less aware of how these killings impacted the lives of young people. In the article, Effects of Police Violence on Inner City Students, the researcher details the consequences of police-involved killings on the educational well-being of high school students living in proximity to those killings. By combining two data sets, the first that details the home addresses of the students, and the second that details the location of police-involved killings, the author was able to reach some conclusions. First, generally, Black and Latinx students are more affected than their white and Asian counterparts. Black and Latinx students are more likely to, one, be victims of officer-involved shootings, and two, more likely to experience negative impacts on their education. Second, the closer a Black or Latinx student lives to an officer-involved killing results in greater effects on their academic performance. For example, in the immediate days following killings, absentee rates spike, and the effects are largest for students living closest to the site of the killing and then dissipate for those who live farther away. Similarly, students living within half a mile of police killings experience decreases in their GPA that last for multiple semesters after an exposure to killings. And the author also found that the earlier a student experiences an officer-involved killing, so say 9th grade, the less likely they are to graduate high school, in doing so at a 3.5% less. In the context of the constrained choice model, it's hard to account for the trauma these young students experience when they're making decisions about their educational well-being. The cognitive and mental fatigue impede long-term decision-making, and that model doesn't account for this.
My article, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, investigates how social structures influence the decision to enroll in college or not, and if so, what to major in. The researchers specifically examine whether or not an older sibling's choice of college and major influence younger siblings' choices. They look at data from 4 countries, the US, Chile, Sweden, and Croatia, all which vary greatly. When faced with scarcity, incomplete information, limited time, and resources, how do younger siblings decide whether to enroll in college, where, and what to major in? The researchers show that an older sibling's enrollment in a better college increases a younger sibling's probability in enrolling in college at all. This finding was especially true for families with low predicted probabilities of enrollment. Additionally, an older sibling's choice of college or major increases the probability that a younger sibling chooses that same major or college. This suggests that older siblings provide otherwise unavailable information about the college experience and potential returns, possibly changing preferences or opportunity costs, and thus influencing enrollment decisions. So this study shows that rationality is a poor assumption of the constrained choice model. Decisions are made with incomplete information, and generally, more information is always better. But not necessarily. This study shows that it's not just more information, but who the information comes from that matters. Relationships and levels of closeness potentially increase the value of information when it comes to decision making and ultimately deciding whether to enroll in college or not.
So in terms of policy implications related to my article, I think we need to rethink about how a 30-second interaction can have lasting impacts on the rest of people's lives and what implications that have for the way we police current communities.
Yeah, and that further underlines the importance of policies like DACA that potentially are short-term policies, but then they increase the benefit of finishing high school for students, especially Hispanic students who are affected by policing and police violence, and therefore it reduces the opportunity cost and leads to just more high school graduation.
And further effect of the policies all coupling on each other is if you can increase the amount of people to graduate high school, then you increase the amount of people who have the option to attend a vocational school or a college. So if the policies are focused on my paper on the housing booms and the housing bust in the market would be much more applicable if the population graduating high school was larger than it currently is.
Tying it all together, if your oldest sibling experiences police violence, or if your oldest sibling that's undocumented and maybe you're not, gets to benefit from DACA, or if your oldest sibling chooses to go to college during a housing crash because there are less jobs available in that industry, you as the younger sibling or the younger sibling after you are more likely to attend college based on the findings of my paper. So policies or events in people's lives can have second and third tier effects when for influencing or increasing college enrollment.
So the impact is magnified. One temporary policy can have an impact in all these different areas and different choices that individuals are making around education.
And so many times you hear policymakers say it's not worth the effort to get something passed because they know that the political environment's going to change. But we feel that our articles show that something short term or something that impacts someone you have a close personal relationship to, that impact will continue to be felt even if the policy goes away.